Hello, hello. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this lecture series. My name is Professor Andrew Timming, and I am the author of this textbook. It's called Applied Statistics, Business and Management Research, and it's published by Sage. I initially wrote this textbook for the non-mathematician. That is to say, you don't need any background in mathematics or statistics to be able to follow it. Throughout this lecture series, I'll give a set of step-by-step instructions on how to carry out key bivariate and multivariate statistical tests that are often used in management research. This particular lecture, the first of the series, corresponds to the first chapter of the book entitled Introduction to Statistics. Shall we get started? All right, sounds like a plan. Let's do it. Okay, here you can see the front cover of the book at the center of this lecture series. It's called Applied Statistics, and what I provide in this lecture series is a summary of the key points articulated throughout this book. Now, this summary will give you a good sense of the principles of data science that we'll be covering, but in order to be truly proficient in these methods, it would be useful for you to not only listen to the lecture series, but also read the book simultaneously. You can access this book from any major bookseller, such as Amazon or Booktopia or any other provider. Or if you prefer, you can go down to your local university library and access it for free. Okay, let's move on. Let's start at the very basics. All research must begin with a research question or a set of research questions. Now, this can be done haphazardly and carelessly, where you simply pick a set of ideas or topics that you're interested in and explore them, or it can be done systematically and with regard to the existing literature in the field. Now, in this particular course, we're going to focus on the social sciences, but the same principles here of beginning with a research question also apply to the natural sciences. Social scientists, such as myself, are motivated to understand the social world. We understand it through our own experiences, through our own sensations and interactions, but our way of understanding the social world is not a systematic and a scientific way of understanding the social world. Now, management scientists, which I guess could be classified as a form of social scientists, are motivated to understand organizations, that is to say employers, leaders within those organizations, employees within those organizations, consumers that may purchase products or services from those organizations, markets, and the regulatory environments within which firms and organizations operate. So all of management science begins with a research question because a research question is what you could consider to be the anchor of social research. Everything that you do in carrying out the research, in collecting the data, in analyzing the data, in interpreting the data, will all come back to your research question or your set of research questions. Because they are at the beginning of the process, it's absolutely essential that you put a good amount of thought into how you articulate your research questions. They should be stated clearly, succinctly, and simply. I can't emphasize this enough. I think a lot of people assume that scientists and academics intentionally use the most complex, esoteric language to describe what they're doing. And some do, that is true, but that's not good science. Good science and good social science is explaining things in as clearly and succinctly a way as you possibly can. So before you move forward with your research, before you start collecting your data, I would strongly urge you to think about how to simplify your research question and explain it and state it in a way that everyone will be able to understand. So research questions should be clearly stated, they should be succinctly stated, and I think you can see an example of that here on this slide. What I've done is I've gone through the literature and pulled out a few examples of research questions that have been asked and have been answered in peer-reviewed research. And you can look up these studies. I have the citation at the end of each question, and you can see for yourself how social scientists, and particularly management scientists, ask and answer research questions. So let's briefly go through these questions and have a look at the types of fields of research that might be relevant for this textbook. The textbook is about management research broadly construed, but there are a number of sub-disciplines within management that are covered throughout this textbook. So the first question could be squarely placed in the field of human resource management. What are the effects of tattoos and piercings on job applicants' chances of success in a job interview? This article was written by, as it happens, myself and a number of colleagues in 2017 and published in the journal Human Resource Management. And what we did in this study was we looked at what the effect of having a visible tattoo or a visible body piercing, a facial piercing, would have on one's chances of success in the labor market. The next question on this slide: to what extent does adding scent or music to a retail environment influence consumers' choices and behaviors, speaks to the subfield of management called marketing. So this particular study deals with what marketing researchers call atmospherics, or the ways in which the environment of a retail shop can influence or impact individual consumers' behaviors. After that, the third question, you can see a pretty standard management or strategy question. What is the impact of acquisitions and takeovers on firm performance? And then we have another question that is related to the field of international human resource management, and that's how does host country mentoring influence the socialization of expatriate employees? Now, after that, we have a question which is, what is the effect of internationalization and foreign direct investment on the performance of small and medium-sized enterprises? And this particular research question, I guess, straddles international business, IB, the field of IB, as well as entrepreneurship. And lastly on the slide, we have the question, are longer commutes to work associated with higher wages? And if so, why? And this particular article was published by French et al. In 2020 in an economics journal called Applied Economics. So you can see from this set of research questions that this book isn't just about management, it is also about management as applied to different fields or subsets of management. This is a bit of an oversimplification, but broadly speaking, management scientists use two different types of methodologies to collect their data. They use qualitative research methods and they use quantitative research methods. So what's the difference between these two approaches? Qualitative research involves sitting down and talking with people. So the researcher sits down with a participant, a respondent, and the researcher conducts an interview asking a series of questions and eliciting a series of responses to those questions. And whatever people say, whatever the participant says or writes in the case of qualitative contextual analysis, is the data. So qualitative methods are essentially, at the broadest level, conversations with individuals about a particular topic, and then those conversations are typically transcribed, and then the text that results from those transcriptions is analyzed. On the other side of the equation, we have quantitative research. Quantitative research involves quantification and measurement of ideas to understand how those ideas are related to each other. So quantitative research is also referred to as statistical research or data science. Quantitative researchers collect quantitative data, that is to say, numeric data, data in the form of numbers, and then they apply various mathematical processes to look for patterns in those numbers. So again, this is a bit of a simplification, but quantitative researchers use numbers and qualitative researchers use words. Now, of course, the best type of research is what we call triangulation. Triangulation involves a combination of qualitative and quantitative research. Very few people do triangulated research, and that's a pity because it does give you the best sense of what's going on here, right? So that's what a researcher is asking, is going into a situation, say, what's going on here? Quantitative research has some important advantages over qualitative research, and qualitative research has some important advantages over quantitative research. So really the best approach, in my view, if you're studying a particular social phenomenon or a set of phenomena, the best approach is to use triangulation. Now, this particular book, this textbook, focuses only on quantitative research, and I would say that this is not because I find qualitative research unimportant. I personally do qualitative research. I think it is important. But in order to circumscribe the textbook and keep it at a manageable length, this particular textbook only looks at quantitative research methods. There are a number of qualitative research methods textbooks out there that you can read and study if you wish to learn more about qualitative methods. Let's talk about the quantitative research process from a big picture point of view. Now, most quantitative research, not all of it, but most of it, begins with a theory that stems from your research question. We've already talked about the importance of articulating clear and succinct research questions. Once we've done that, we can then move on to developing a theory that attempts to explain the phenomena that we're analyzing, that we're studying or researching. Now, a theory is, or can be defined as, a set of expectations about the way something works, right? So good theories, in my view, are constructed carefully on the basis of both existing theories and existing literature, right? So you don't want to reinvent the wheel when it comes to answering your research question. When you pose a research question, you want to look at the question of whether there are existing theories that have already been used to explain or answer that particular question. And you want to look at the existing literature that has also looked at that particular question. This way you don't have to start from scratch and build a theory from the ground up. On occasion, you may be expected to do that if there are no theories that adequately address your particular question. But generally speaking, what you're doing in this process, in this quantitative research process, is building on and improving, crucially, improving theory that already exists. So once you have articulated a theory, on the basis of that theory, you then articulate a set of what we call hypotheses. Your hypotheses can be defined as educated guesses about how something works. So your hypotheses are what you're actually testing in your research. You articulate a set of hypotheses, you collect data, you analyze the data, and then you either confirm or you disconfirm your hypotheses. In other words, you either find support for what you expected to happen on the basis of your theory, or you don't find support for what you expected would happen on the basis of your theory. And that's fine. If your hypotheses are not confirmed or if your theory is rejected, that kind of information is just as valuable to science and progress as theories and hypotheses that are confirmed. Now, quantitative research is predicated on the idea of quantification, right? We can't statistically analyze ideas. What we can do is statistically analyze numbers. So what we need to do is take our ideas and convert them into numbers. This is what we call quantification. Quantification is the process through which we take our ideas and we turn them into numbers. Now, to understand how ideas relate to one another mathematically, we have to convert them into numbers because we can't mathematically analyze ideas. Say, for example, gender is an idea, right? We can't statistically or mathematically analyze something called male or female. But what we can do is we can take those concepts, those constructs, for example, male and female, and convert them into numbers. So we can say that male equals 1 and female equals 2. Or we could say that male equals 0 and female equals 1, or any number of variations. So once we've converted our ideas into numbers, then we can use mathematical procedures to identify patterns in the data, right? So let's say we're interested in looking at whether men or women in an organization differ on their levels of job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is an idea. It would need to then be converted into numbers. So we could do that by asking respondents not only what is your agenda, but how satisfied are you on a scale of, say, 1 to 5 or 1 to 7, where 1 equals extremely dissatisfied and 7 equals extremely satisfied. So once we've quantified both of our factors, our constructs or our variables, then we can employ a set of mathematical procedures to identify patterns and answer our research question. So those patterns then tell us something about how the ideas are related to one another. Quantification is no easy task. It's very difficult to do accurately. And the reason it's difficult is that there are multiple ways of quantifying a single idea or a single construct or a single variable. A good example here would be in relation to the question of performance, right? Performance is probably the most quantified variable in all of management research, because what management researchers are trying to do, generally speaking, is to look at how different factors or different policies or procedures might be related to performance. But what do we actually mean by performance? So there are not only different ways of measuring performance, but there are different units or levels of analysis associated with this concept of performance. There is individual performance, that is to say, the performance of an individual employee. There is team performance, that would be a different measurement to individual performance. There's unit performance, there's organizational performance or performance among subsidiaries. And then, of course, there's national performance, right? The performance of a nation, which is typically measured by GNP or GDP. So these different levels are referred to as units of analysis. So we have individual level units of analysis, and then we have collective or wider organizational or even national level units of analysis. So what I'd like you to do as we close this lecture is for you to think about how many metrics you can identify that might measure the concept of individual performance. How many different ways can you measure an individual employee's performance? Okay, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this lecture. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the flip side.